this video we're going to talk about this book which I'm holding right here. This is called Amish Deception. Let me show it to you here. Amish Deception, autobiography by David E. Yoder. There's his picture on the back. And this thing here is going to shock a lot of you that are not aware of the Amish deception. And like I said in the introductory video, I saw a lot of things and heard a lot of things growing up in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. And if you didn't see the introduction, please watch that first before you watch this. But I saw a lot of things, I heard a lot of things, and a lot of it just seemed so unbelievable because the Amish have this you know, kind of a image to them that they're these, you know, God-fearing, humble, quiet, peaceful types of thing. And I'd hear these really wild stories about child molestation and abuse and incest and all kinds of weird things, drunken, fornicating parties and whatnot. You know, hoedowns they called them. And I just kind of thought, well, you know, some of it's true, but it can't all be true. You know, and you know, again, let me say this: not every Amish person out there is guilty of the things that we're going to be seeing in here. There are some Amish people that are decent people and whatever else. They're just stuck in this religious cult called the Amish. But the whole point is, this system is it enables this abuse to happen. It's the kind of a thing where if you're trying to purify your flesh all the time and you wear this special uniform, you can be very, very wicked and very sinful on the inside, but you put your uniform on, you go to your special church meetings, whatever else, to the outside world you can look very righteous, but inwardly you're full of dead men's bones, you know, whited sepulchre on the outside, dead men's bones on the inside, like Jesus called the Pharisees. Okay, and that's very, very true of the Amish. Again, you know, some of the stories I heard growing up, it was just like, wow, they really would do this? You know, they put up a very good front. And like I said, there are some Amish that are not that bad of people. But you're in the system that produces bad people. You're in a system with a lot of unscriptural rules and a lot of things that are horrible that can create people and can destroy people. That's why I compare it to Catholicism. And there are actually direct tie-ins to Catholicism that we'll be talking about in future videos. Definitely there are some connections to Catholicism. Irrefutable connections. We'll be talking about those in the future. But the system, just like Catholicism, you have a priest that molests children, and then he puts his robes back on and he goes out and he's doing all the Mass stuff and the Eucharist celebration and all that. People confessing their sins to the guy. You know, yeah, okay. Same thing with the Amish. With the Amish, there's the outward veneer of holy living and plain, simple, hard-working people, but the inward reality, the real stuff that's going on, is quite horrible. And we're going to see that in this book here from a Schwarzentrooper Amish, okay, the strictest of the strict. They don't get any more strict than the Schwarzentrooper brand of Amish. Okay, we're going to see about some of the stuff here. So here we have the preface of Amish Deception. This is the basic ordnung. And as I've said in my last video, the introductory video, the ordnung is basically the written orders. Okay, again, you know, I have to say this, just like any other cult, the Bible is not going to be the final authority. With Catholicism, they have the Catechism. With the Mormons, they have the Book of Mormon. Even like the Methodists, they have the Book of Discipline. The Lutherans have a Catechism, you know, and the Amish have an ordnung. They have the written orders that they're given, and they have 2 services a year where they go over these orders. And you aren't going to believe some of the stuff that's in the ordnung. It's absolutely insane. But let's continue here. The basic ordnung. Today there are at least a dozen different types of Amish churches, each one believing that they are the only church with the right set of rules. The mark of a cult, in other words. The Schwarzentrooper Church does not recognize the rest of the different Amish churches as being true Christians. Okay, that thing gets put on me sometimes. You know, you think you're the only one that's saved. Not at all. No, not at all. There are a lot of people out there that believe all kinds of dumb things, you know, and live in sin in different ways. If you've come to the Lord in a broken state, you came as a sinner, and you put your faith in Jesus Christ, you don't believe that you're in your own self-righteousness anymore. You know, you came and you said, I'm a sinner. God, please save me. And the Lord saved you, you're saved. You're my brother or sister in Christ. That's the way it is. We might disagree on some doctrinal issues and whatever else. Okay, whatever. But that I don't say that you have to believe everything that I believe in order to be saved. Not at all. Okay, anybody tells you that, they're lying. But continuing here on page 2, it says, in fact, all of Amish deception is considered sacred according to my culture and should not have been made public. Okay? And let me just stop there for a minute too. I was recently in contact, just back in December. I'd been talking to an Amishman, Jonas Yoder. I don't think he's related to David Yoder here. But, and I asked him, I said, Jonas, I said, do you have a written ordinance? No, it's just kind of word of mouth type of a thing. Maybe some others do, but no, you know. And he was raised Schwarzentrooper. So he's had the same upbringing as, you know, David here. And I didn't really understand it at the time, but as we've been studying and researching, I realized that he lied to me. He lied right to my face. You know, and he professes to be a Christian too, by the way. But he lied right to my face. Oh, no, there's no written ordinance. That's the very basis of their system. I actually read a quote the one time. Somebody said that might even be in this book, I forget, but they said that you could basically pull the Bible out from underneath the Amish church and they go right on doing their thing because they have the ordinance. Just like the Catholics. The Catholics have their traditions. They have their catechism, the church traditions of the fathers and all this other stuff. They don't need the Bible. Again, the mark of a cult. Well, let's look at some of the stuff that's in the ordinance. You aren't going to believe some of this stuff. Okay, talking about their clothing here. The material shall be made of dacron, broadcloth, rayon, or polyester. And the reason for that is because those are synthetic fibers. They're not even fibers that God made. Okay, they're not like cotton or wool or silk or things like that. They're synthetic fibers, but they don't wrinkle, you see. And because wrinkles are sinful and worldly, and it's against the ordinance. Over here on the next page it says, the reading of the actual ordinance can very easily take a couple hours. So it's not, you know, and I have reading highlighted there, by the way, too, because this Jonas Yoder told me, he said, no, there is no written ordinance. Then how can you read it? It's just spoken, you know, it's kind of a verbal agreement that everybody kind of agrees to live by these rules, and sure, right. Here again in the ordinance, those who are not married wear black caps. The married must wear white caps all the time. And of course, this is a perversion of the 1 Corinthians chapter 11, talking about head coverings, having the head covered as a woman. Now, please show me anywhere in there where there's a difference made between married and single women. Single women wear black, you know, head coverings, and the married women wear white. Huh? That's not in there. You won't find that anywhere at all in 1 Corinthians chapter 11, where it's talking about head coverings. Absolutely ridiculous. And they believe that's for their salvation, by the way, too. It's part of their salvation. We're going to be talking more about head coverings. I did a video a year or two ago, but we're going to be talking more about head coverings here in the future. And again, how they relate to the monastic order of nuns. So, well, let's continue here. Down a little farther on the page. It is against the ordinance to use a scissor or a razor anywhere on their body. They are not allowed to cut their hair, shave their legs, or underarms. Talking about women. Okay? What right does any preacher have to tell a woman about personal hygiene? Okay, I will say this right now in front of God and men. If you ever meet me in public, and you're a Christian saved woman, and I tell you anything about your personal hygiene and tell you you're not allowed to this or you're not allowed to that, I give you permission right now to grab any blunt object in the area and hit me over the head with it. Okay? Because I've crossed the line. That is totally inappropriate. Preachers do not have that authority to tell you that you can't take care of yourself hygienically and things like this. Check this one out. There's another one, funny one here with this. Now this is the Schwarzentrooper. Okay, a lot of the Amish don't, you know, do this whole thing, but check this out. Page 5 here. It says the men are allowed to smoke tobacco such as cigars and pipes. chewing tobacco is allowed also, but cigarettes are against the ordinance. So you can smoke a pipe, you can smoke a cigar, you can chew tobacco, but cigarettes, they're off limits. At least until the bishop decides that they are okay. Then he can rewrite the ordinance, you see. And you know, again, the hypocrisy of the Amish. You know, I grew up around that, you know. All telephones are of the devil, they're wicked and everything else, but you can have a telephone booth over in that part of your property. You know, you can't have you know, rubber wheels on your buggy or on your farm implements, your manure spreader or your trailer, whatever. You know, sometimes they even have tractors. You know, you can't have rubber wheels. You have to have steel wheels on that. But you can have rubber wheels on your scooter that you cruise around the back roads with. Okay, no gas motors. I saw that too growing up. You know, no gas motors. You got to be out there pushing the little push mower thing and doing your yard that way. You know, you can't have a gas motor. And I saw this one Amishman, it just cracked me up. He driving to work the one time. I used to work up in Hinkletown, up outside of Effort. I worked for Mennonites, Mennonite cabinet making shop. John Snyder was his name. And I'm driving down this one road going over towards New Holland. You go through where I lived in Strasburg, outside of Strasburg, Ronks area, and you drive over through New Holland and then over up towards Ephrata to go to Hinkletown. Anyhow, so I'm driving towards New Holland and I see this Amishman. He's sitting on top. He has a chair somehow attached to a riding mower, or not a riding mower, gas lawnmower, excuse me, not a riding mower. He made his own riding mower, but he's got this chair attached to a gas lawnmower and he's got a horse hooked up to it, and he's sitting there in this chair with a gas mower underneath him being pulled around his yard by his horse mowing his yard. And I thought to myself, you talk about a bunch of backward, ridiculous nonsense. I guess maybe that was a little loophole that he found in the ordinance, that he could mow his yard with a gas mower as long as he wasn't pushing it, as long as his horse was pulling it. You know, I thought, what is this, you know? It just, hypocrisy. The hypocrisy of the Amish, it just knows no bounds. I mean, you know, you can't have a car, but you can hire people that have cars to take you around. You know, you can't this, you can't that, but you can, you know, go with other people. Continue. It's against the ordinance for the men to wear underwear or have any type of pajamas. Chapter and verse on that one. Oh, it's got to be in the King James Bible someplace. Yeah, sure, right. The men are not allowed to use any type of aftershave lotion or deodorant. I can attest to that one as well. Okay, again, being from Lancaster County, we used to have a joke. You can smell Amish before you can see them, and very, very true. I remember I was deer hunting the one time down the forest back behind the house where I grew up, and I was literally sitting there. It was early morning, and I thought I heard a noise like sticks cracking or leaves, you know, being rustled, somebody walking, and I was like, and I could smell it. I thought, oh, here comes an Amishman. I literally smelled him before I could see him. You know, and I thought, you know, and sure enough, here he comes walking by, you know, and stuff. How you doing? You know, did you see anything? I'm like, yeah, I'm seeing you, you know. Thank you. You know. But another little quick story here. I was a wood turner when I was down there in Lancaster County, down to Peach Lane. I was a wood turner for a number of years. And I did some work for some different Amish. They had chair shops and everything, and it was kind of funny because they couldn't turn the traditional way with hand tools and things like that. There was a guy, Daniel Zook, that I did some work for, and he had a $35,000 computerized replicator lathe, but he couldn't turn wood by doing hand tools. Okay, figure that one out. But I remember he came. Actually, I think he died now of cancer, but last I heard. But he came the one time to come to my shop and you know, drove his buggy up the whole thing. Oh, and by the way, I forgot to mention the house where I was raised at 60 Peach Lane. It was actually bought by Amish, so Amish now own the home where I was raised. So that's another issue. But this time, Daniel Zook came up and he came to my wood shop, and they asked about some chair spindles and things if I could make them, and we kind of designed them out and whatever else. My shop smelled like body odor for a week. And that's when I had my exhaust fans going and everything else. It smelled that bad for a week afterwards. You know, see, it's again, you go back to this whole monastic suffering thing. I'm going to suffer by not taking a bath so I can make other people suffer too, I guess. But, you know, incredible. Down here we have the Ordnung on sex between married couples is as follows. It is against the Ordnung to have sex on fasting holidays, which include January 6th, also known as Old Christmas, Good Friday, the Sunday between the Ordnung and the communion service in the spring and in the fall, the end of August, after they harvest all their crops, and Thanksgiving. Okay, chapter and verse on that. Show me anywhere in the King James Bible where a bishop, which, by the way, bishop is not some special office that's separate from a pastor or an elder, okay? It's just a name for a pastor. Show me anywhere at all where a bishop, a pastor, has the right to tell you, a couple, when they can be in the marriage bed or not. You see? I think it's far worse. Like I said, this book is going to blow a lot of your minds. You know. Here we have page 8. The bishop is the leader of the church and he has the final say. Very true. You know, and it's interesting too, this Daniel Zook that I used to know. I remember I was over at his shop in Paradise the one time, and he was showing me this big expensive lathe of his. Hey, I see this digital readout. I'm going, how's he got a digital readout? He doesn't have electricity. And he kneels down in front of the machine and he looks up at me and he smiles and he grins and he goes, "Don't tell the bishop." And he lifts up a floorboard there in the barn and he's got a plug. And he takes the computer lathe and he plugs it into the floor, into this receptacle that he had hidden underneath his floorboards. Don't tell the bishop, you know. And then, of course, the lathe lights all up and everything gets started there. Yeah. And of course, you know, being from Lancaster County too, I understand that a lot of times the bishops just conveniently look the other way when there's enough money involved, you know. Down here at the bottom of the page, the bishop, his two servants, and the deacon think they are special and God has called them, that in most cases their authority shouldn't be challenged, just like with the Vatican. The Ordnung is not about Scripture out of the New Testament or the salvation of your soul, but it is about control. Right there you go. David Yoder's absolutely right. Okay? Incredible. Here we go on the next page, page 9. If every member is in compliance with the Ordnung, 2 weeks later they will have communion service where the members break bread, have one sip of homemade wine, and wash each other's feet. This is to purify their soul from all their sins in the past 6 months. Communion service is considered very sacred. Absolutely no infractions to the Ordnung at this time is acceptable. Should there be any infractions to the Ordnung, there will be no communion services held until the infraction is solved. So, just like Roman Catholicism teaches that the Eucharist, the system of transubstantiation, is what purifies the soul from sin. And you have to continually go back and you have to continually take communion in Catholicism to have your sins removed. They're doing the same thing with the Amish. Okay? The Amish are doing the same thing. But it's Christianity. No, it's Catholicism. That's what it is. And here we have page 15. He says, according to the Scripture, I believe they are not a religion. My people are a cult. And I agree totally. Now we're just going to go through some of this stuff here, some of the story, and this is a very interesting book. I will warn to my brothers and sisters in Christ out there, if you decide to get this book, there is profanity in it. There's some sexual things. I mean, he's honest about what goes on among the Amish. All right, it's very brutal and very blunt in some areas. And again, I appreciate that. I appreciate honesty. I don't like profanity. I don't like some other things like that. But I'll tell you, I appreciate honesty. So, well, let's continue here. We have page 20. Before I read this little line here, his mother basically had a very difficult childbirth with him. She had to have a cesarean section, which is against the Ordnung and all this, and it was a real big deal. And they weren't letting her go in and get checkups, medical checkups, which the Amish are infamous for that. I had a sister-in-law, my oldest brother's wife. She worked at an Amish clinic in Lancaster County down near Georgetown, and she told stories, horror stories, of Amish bringing children in that should have gone to the emergency room, and they'll let them go for a month to see if things get better, and stuff, and finally they're just like, the child's almost dead, and they take them to some little medical clinic someplace. I mean, fell out of a barn and landed on their head, and their head's been busted open, and they just been putting paper towels on it or something for a month. I mean, it's insane, the kind of things that happen. But check this out. See if this reminds you of anything. Page 20. The fall of 1958, Mom had a mental breakdown. At one point, she would crawl on the floor on her hands and knees and bark. Soon, she did not speak at all. Now, you understand the Bible. You understand what goes on in charismatic Babel buildings. You understand that that's a mark of devil possession. But see, you'd never think that if you saw the Amish. You'd think, oh, they're plain, common, simple, whatever, Page 21. After Mom had completely recovered, she was excommunicated for allowing her tubes to be tied, and also for her mental breakdown. So they were the bishop and the ministers and things, the deacons, they would not allow her to go to the hospital to be treated. So she had a mental breakdown as a result, because she was just falling apart mentally. And then they excommunicated her because she fell apart mentally because of what they did. Pretty messed up. Down here it says, during the time that Mom was excommunicated, she was not allowed to eat at the same table as her family, nor could there be any sexual intercourse. I've had people write to me over the years, husbands or wives or whatever, and they start getting into some of that stuff, intimacy within the marriage, and things, and my husband's not doing this and my wife's not doing that. And, I say, you know what? That is between you, the two of you, and the Lord. Right? I'm a preacher, I'm a Bible teacher, but I don't get into that matter. I'll tell you what the Bible says, but I'm not going to counsel you on those issues. Okay? That is private stuff. Those are private matters. I don't talk about that. And I certainly am not going to ban people from being together. A husband and a wife from coming together in the marriage bed. That is off limits. I mean, that is so far beyond wrong. I don't even know what to say. I mean, it's crazy. Page 31. The feuding in the Amish community was becoming so intense that it was almost unbearable for my parents. We didn't look forward to going to church anymore. Church started at 9 o'clock in the morning and sometimes lasted until 5 or 6 o'clock in the evening. Okay, and we're going to be talking about some of those church practices as well. Some of the way that they sing, some of their, order of service and things like this. Again, very, very Catholic. And there have been numerous Catholics that go to live among the Amish because they're so similar in their beliefs. But, it's kind of funny. I thought, again, of how many of us can relate to that. You're raised in a Babel building, someplace you call them a church, and it's like you get to a point where you don't even enjoy going anymore because it's such a wicked system. Well, what's the solution? Well, run away and go join the world. No, the solution is to run to Jesus Christ and get into a truly scriptural practice of worshiping the Lord. And you don't need some Babel building to do that, by the way. Page 32. The Amish appeared to be very peaceful from the outside, but inside at least 25% of the time it was anything but peaceful. If it wasn't the bishop or the preacher struggling for power, it was the members looking what they could find on each other. It is a system of control, in other words. Once they got old, they'd start picking on innocent children, talking about how they walked and talked or sat in church, or how they wore their clothes. I got punished for standing up too straight, holding my head too high. They even said my walk was too worldly. Again, the mark of a cult. It starts out very controlling, and it gets worse and worse and worse and worse and worse, and you end up having everybody turning on each other, trying to find ways that they can blame other people and find fault with other people so that they can report back to the bishop, and get his favor. It's just disgusting. Soon going to church was like entering a war zone. Families turned against one another. Just replace the name Amish with Baptist or Presbyterian or Methodist or whatever, you know. Happens to a lot of people. Down here further it says, anytime there's a split in the Amish culture, there's so much chaos that it is almost unbearable. Preachers turn against members, members against preachers, brothers against sisters, parents against children, and children against parents. And again, you know, that happens in the Amish. It happens in a lot of different churches. But, you know, you say, why read those quotes then? Well, because I'm trying to help people to understand that the Amish don't have it figured out. It's not, well, the Amish, because of their plain, simple lifestyle and the way that they live, you know, and work so hard and everything else, they don't have the problems that others do. Yeah, they do. Yeah, they do. Continuing, page 34. We asked Mom and Dad if we could stay home from church, but they said no. How many of us have been there? We had to drive about 5 miles to church. The older boys from 16 years of age and up were in the milk house smoking their pipes and cigars, which was their custom as soon as we had the horses tied up. And they're doing this not secretly, by the way. The Schwarzentrooper Amish can do that. They can smoke freely like that, and there's no problem with that. But again, you know, you see the problem that so much of organized religion has. You go to church. Church is not what you were in all the time. You're not a member of church, the body of Christ. You're not there all the time in that you never leave church. Oh no, it's a place that you go to. See? And it's a place where you act differently when you get there than you do when you're in private there. You know what I mean? You dress differently when you go to church. You know, you're outside of church, you can dress another way. You can tell jokes, say things and whatever else that you'd never do when you're in church. That's why I speak so much against this whole philosophy of Babel buildings. But it says here, page 43, we would sit down and talk about the difference in the Amish. Their girls wore shorter dresses, and I always thought they were cuter. Okay, again, there you have different, less conservative Amish. Their uniform there will be different. They'll have shorter dresses. And again, you know, I'm a firm believer in modest apparel for women, but what the Amish are wearing, the Amish women are wearing, I don't consider that modest apparel. I consider that a monastic religious uniform. That's not modest. Okay, you're drawing attention to yourself because of your uniform that you're wearing. And a lot of times these, you know, I've seen Amish women, their dresses are coming right down to just below their knee. You know, and you see them working out in the garden. You're driving around the back roads and stuff like that. You see them working out in the garden, you know, and they're leaned over like this. I mean, you can see right up their skirt. That's not modest. Okay. Now I'm going to read something here, and I'm sorry I have to read this thing here just to kind of help people to understand this is a sexual thing. If you have children, just, you know, mute the thing or whatever. Just, hey, children, leave the room, something like that. But again, I need to read this stuff because people are very ignorant of what the Amish are all about. Okay? He is doing what's happening here. Just to give you a little warning here, David Yoder is bed courting. Okay, that's something that the conservative Amish will do. They will actually go over, the young man goes and he goes to the girl that he's dating, whatever, courting. He'll go to her house and he'll actually go upstairs and get in bed with her and do some interesting things. Okay, and actually I'm not even going to read this here. You know, I'll just let you read this for yourself. She unbuttoned his pants, and there you go. You can read that, pause it, read it. And, you know, you say, well, Brian, did you hear about that stuff growing up? Yeah, I did. When I was growing up in Lancaster County, we heard about barn parties that they would have. They called them hoedowns. And essentially, it'd be a whole bunch of young Amish people getting together. And they basically would go into different parts of the barn, and, you know, you pick your partner and you go in and you fornicate. You say, when was that going on? In the 1990s or something like that? No, actually my father knew about it back when he was young. Him and an ex-Amishman back in his day, Jesse Smoker was his name, they actually snuck into a hoedown the one time. My dad saw some of the stuff that was going on there. Rock music, alcohol, and fornication. And, you know, the Amish church knows about it. That's the whole thing. This is not, he snuck in there without the parents knowing. The parents know about this thing. Again, understand this. If you don't know about the Amish culture, you need to understand this. These activities of fornication are known about by the bishop, by the parents. I mean, I know Roman Catholics that have better morals than this. I know Roman Catholics I went to in high school, public high school, that they were scared to death of their parents finding out about their fornication. And they would fornicate with their boyfriend or girlfriend or whatever, depending on what they were. They'd fornicate when their parents were not at home. But you have these same Amish, these ultra-conservative, plain, simple, God-fearing, you have these same people, and they're in their room sleeping, and meanwhile some guy's over here fornicating with their daughter. And they know about it. Again, we knew another ex-Amish woman down there. I can't think of what her name was now. I don't remember her name, but she told us, she said very few young Amish women make it to the altar, the marriage altar, as virgins. Most of them have fornicated many times with multiple partners. But this is the plain, simple, holy people. Sure it is. Yeah, right. You know, we need to get rid of these myths. That's the whole thing. Christians, people out there that are lost and whatever, you know, people need to get rid of the myth that the Amish are holy, pure people. They're not. They're filthy. Absolutely filthy. You know? But continuing here, page 52. While we lived in Medina County, Ohio, Pete had also taken a severe beating. It was so bad that Pete won't talk about it even today, except to acknowledge that it was extreme. I remember that beating. Pete wasn't right after that for at least a week. Another thing that you're going to see with the Amish, and especially in this book here, which he describes, is child abuse. Extreme child abuse. They will beat their children literally to death. You say, well, you know, you're saying figurative. Literally. Literally beat them to death. They will kill their own children because they're trying to drive the devil out or something of them. Extreme physical abuse. And they get away with it. Because people are scared to death to do anything against the Amish cult. I'm talking about secular people. There's massive cover-up with law enforcement, with different types of social services. Again, I heard about this stuff. You know, growing up, I heard about some of these things that were going on. It's confirmed by David Yoder in this book. Absolutely unbelievable. In the early 1900s, the Amish were all one church according to the Amish history book. As I sit here writing about my Amish childhood, they are coming up with even more Amish churches and beliefs. Happens all the time. Happens all the time. The community down in Smyrna. There was a guy, some kind of a Amish, Mennonite, whatever, Catholic, you know, from up in Canada. He came down here to start a Christian community. Again, you have the whole thing. I'll talk about this in the future of communitarianism, communism. Okay, everybody coming together, and you're basically, you know, giving up this and giving up that, and let's all live together in harmony. All this stuff. And the guy came and he tried to start something down there in Smyrna Mills, and here in Maine. It fell apart. A bunch of other Amish came in and revitalized the thing. Now they got all kinds of money down there. Now they're trying to spread out into other communities. The Amish, and I'm going to say this again, and again, I don't hate Amish people as individuals. Right? I hate the system that they're part of. Just like with Catholics. I don't hate you because you're a Catholic. I hate the system that you're part of. Alright, so when I say these things, don't think I'm hating the Amish people. But the Amish people are very much like a cancer. Alright? They will come into an area that has been established by regular people, non-Amish, and they will start to buy up those houses and farms and whatever else, and then they start to spread. And when they get more families to come in, they'll buy up a whole bunch of farms, and then they'll put word out among their national network, which we're going to be talking about that too in the future. Here they do have a national network, and also some of it's online too, which is kind of funny. But they have this network, and they'll put word out, hey, we need Amish for this community up here. And the couple that I know down in Smyrna Mills, Jonas and Keturah Yoder, they are transplants from, I think it was Minnesota, I think. They came to Maine. The guys up in Fort Fairfield are from New York, the settlement in New York, which has some very strange tie-ins, by the way, and he's going to be talking about that in this book. They're Millers up there, is their last name, Millers. And all these different Amish, they move around, and they go and they take over areas. In Lancaster County, if you want to see what happens to a place where the Amish have come in and taken over it, just go to Lancaster County. Lancaster County was just a calm, peaceful, little quiet farm type of a community. The Amish come in, they take over, they start coming in, buying up the homes, buying up the farms. The price of land goes absolutely through the roof because they bring in tourism, they bring in all this other stuff, and as they bring in more tourism, they bring in more crime. Tourism brings crime. So they will literally destroy an area. I can attest to it. I'm from Lancaster County. You know, the oldest Amish settlement in America is from Lancaster County. Lancaster Berks area. Okay, Lebanon Berks, up in that whole area. So, but let's continue here. Page 57. In about 2 months, I was scheduled to be baptized, but there were still too many unanswered questions. For instance, some of the higher class Amish couldn't show in the Bible where it said you had to be Amish to go to heaven. That's, again, why they will not, they try to, especially the really conservative ones, they try to keep the Bible out of the hands of the people. Okay, you're not supposed to walk out of your home carrying a Bible. That's a big no-no in the Ordnung of most Amish communities. Not only that, but they also use the Heilige Schrift of Martin Luther, the German Bible. And you say, oh, that's because they understand it. No, they don't. They speak Pennsylvania Dutch. Pennsylvania Dutch is not German. It's a very, very low dialect, and in fact, it in itself has been corrupted and corrupted and corrupted. We used to call it Pennsylvania slush, because you know, you listen to them talking, and they're going, this tacos, and going to the store, you know, going out into the farm, to, you know, they'll mix in a lot of English with it because they don't know Pennsylvania Dutch words for certain phrases or whatever else. So, you know, and it's not a written language. It's just spoken. They kind of pass it down as time goes by. You know, so pretty bad. They don't have, you know, people don't have the Bible. They're not encouraged to have the Bible or study the Bible on their own. Continuing, it says, Edna said my parents were right. I needed to join church because we were going to get married this fall and take over the farming at her parents' place. I had never asked Edna to get married for the last 6 months. Edna was trying desperately to get pregnant or get caught. One night we were having sex. I heard footsteps coming upstairs. I knew it was her brother Joe. We had to go he had to go past our room to get to his. He would always stop in and talk for a while. Usually he would be high on marijuana. Edna, we got to quit. Your brother is coming, I said impatiently. And of course, you know, I'm not going to read the whole thing there. But, you know, again, you say, well, drug use? Drug use among the Amish? Oh yeah, absolutely. Again, that was another thing. It was just common knowledge in Lancaster County. You know that the youth, the Amish youth, the young people, they, you know, do drugs all the time. There was actually, the FBI had to get involved over in Intercourse, Pennsylvania. It's a little town in Pennsylvania. And over there, some Amish youth were busted for dealing with a motorcycle gang, getting drugs from them. You know, and the FBI got involved. And, you know, most people were like, oh, you know, just leave them alone. They were just, you know, whatever. It's a massive cover-up for these Amish people. But, you know, he uses some profanity on this page, and I had highlighted it. I'm not going to bother showing it, but, you know, do the Amish use profanity? Oh, absolutely. Again, you know, working for the Mennonites and things over the years, and as a cabinet maker, you know, I mean, just you'd be around these guys, get a bunch of Mennonite men together, conservative. I'm talking the ultra-conservative Mennonites and Amish. You know, you get a bunch of those guys together, you wouldn't believe the dirty jokes and the profanity and things that comes out of their mouths. But they're Christian because of their religion. No, they're not. Okay, now I'm not even going to read this. You can pause this if you want to see it there, but this guy, Sam, on his wedding night, he basically sexually molests David Yoder's younger sister on his wedding night. Here David Yoder writes on the next page, stooping to this level on one's wedding night was simply disgusting, I thought. The temptation for two people who are in love is even greater if your culture believes in bed courtship and no other dating is acceptable. Right? And by the way, they'll do that too. You know, the really conservative Amish, they will not allow you to date any other way. You know, it's not okay for you to go off, you know, in a buggy or whatever out at night on the town or something like that. That's wrong. That's against the ordinance. But the young man can come over and fornicate with the daughter 2 bedrooms down from where the parents are sleeping, and that's okay. And the bishops know about that, and that's all right. Now, I imagine a lot of you probably are going, what? You know, this seems almost crazy to believe. You know, too hard to believe. See, that's the whole point of it. That's the whole point. That's how the Amish cult has been so successful down through the years, because it's just, you just can't wrap your mind around it. You think these people are doing all this stuff, they're that wicked? You know? Yeah, they are. Page 66. All Fran could think about was watching her older sister get tied to a plow years earlier and get severely beaten. Okay, David Yoder's wife that he married, her name's Fran. And there were all kinds of bad things happening to her too, which we'll be talking about here as we continue in the book. But, you know, cruel, absolutely horrible beatings like you couldn't imagine. You know, it goes on within the Amish. Here's talking about a school teacher in an Amish school. It says the teacher was going out of the way to pick on them, even took it as far as whipping them with a rubber hose. Try that sometime if you don't think it's painful. Alright, there's a little bit more profanity on that page. I'm not going to read that. But it's just, the Amish are a lot different than most people think. It says here, at the same time I was being grounded for breaking in the schoolhouse, Eli Gingrich was being punished for having sex with his daughter, Sevilla. And you're going to see by the end of the book that, yeah, that happens a lot. Incest, that's what that's called. Sam, who was still raping her, talking about Fran here, Sam was respected within the Amish community. He did whatever preachers wanted him to do. I was the opposite. Again, you know, so many of us can relate to this. You know, if you saw the Jack Hyles study, you see that was going on there. All kinds of fornication and sexual promiscuity and everything else, and it's just like, oh, he's a real active soul winner. He's really good here. I mean, Jack Hyles himself is you know, fornicating with his deacon's wife, Jenny Nishik. You know, and it's just like, oh, he's a good preacher. You know, leave Jack Hyles alone. You leave Brother Hyles alone. You know, it's just disgusting. And you know, this Sam guy, the same one that was sexually molesting David Yoder's younger sister on his own wedding night. You know, he's also raping his sister-in-law, Fran. Her older sister's the one that's married to this Sam guy, and she's being raped. Fran is being raped by Sam, and she's like 15, 16 years old at the time. Underage rape. And you're going to see by the end of the book that nothing was ever done. They never went to the law about it, because that's against the ordinance. Page 79. In the fall of 1976, the preachers in the church sprinkle baptized Tony and Dennis and all 4 girls, but the bishop and preachers said I had to be punished a little more for all the sins I had committed. In the spring of 1977, the church finally decided that I'd repented enough for my sins. The bishop and preachers baptized me. And baptism within the Catholic, excuse me, I meant Amish system, it's sprinkling. It's not baptism by immersion. And they do it for salvation, just like the Catholics do. Page 83. However, I'm convinced that the Amish bishop and preacher had one thing in mind: to break my spirit. And they keep, you know, excommunicating, keep putting all this other stuff. See, they want to break your spirit. Why? Did you see last week's study, the you know, satanic Ignatian self-righteousness? Breaking the spirit is part of mind control. If you want to gain control over somebody, you have to break them mentally. That's what the Amish system is. It is a system of mind control. Page 84. When we lived in Wayne County, Dad had leased our farm out to the oil company. Of course, if you're down in Pennsylvania, that's a big thing. It's up in it's in West Virginia. I think it's heading up into New York as well now. But the gas companies, the oil companies, the whole hydro fracking thing, it's just disgusting. And again, you know, we knew people over in Tioga County in Pennsylvania, and they talked about the Mennonite farmers up there were selling their land all the time to the gas companies. And they're getting all kinds of money, millions and millions of dollars from this thing. Yeah, sure, it's destroying the water system in the area and it's destroying the environment, but hey, we got rich off of it. Yeah, my wife and I have taken to call Mennonites, we call them Mammonites a lot of times because they're known for being very money hungry. And again, you know, I'm not, again, you know, my grandparents were Mennonite. They were good people. They were nice people. They didn't go along with a lot of the covetousness and whatever else. So again, I'm not blanket saying anybody who's a Mennonite is wicked and satanic and evil and whatever. But the system, you see, the system, just like with the Amish. Page 92. A couple of Amish preachers and a couple of members were willing to talk to the public about us. They told their story, their side of the story, trying to disgrace us in any way possible. When you go against the Amish, they will destroy your character. David, you are going to hell. He said, oh, this is when he actually left the Amish at one point. David, you are going to hell, he said. You've always been a bad boy ever since I can remember. You have always been different, never any good. Then looking at me, he added, too bad it was Joe who got killed instead of you. I'd rather come to your funeral as an Amish man than see you stand before me in your English clothes. So salvation with a lot of these really radical Amish, salvation is literally what you're wearing. If you have Amish clothes on, well, you're going to, you know, you have a chance of going to heaven. They can't say you're going to heaven. It's just a chance of going to heaven. You know, if you have clothes on like I do right now, you know, you're wearing jeans and whatever else, oh well, you're obviously going to hell. That's why most Amish will be very, very standoffish with you if you try to talk to them about salvation, because they won't even think about talking to you like you're saved or whatever, or anything at all about salvation, unless you're wearing their kind of clothing, their monastic Catholic uniform they have. Absolutely disgusting. Page 97. They come back to the Amish here. It says, so we had made arrangements to go back to the Amish. This meant we had to get rid of all of our possessions, including our personal photo album. Okay, having pictures of yourself is a sin. It's a graven image and all this other stuff. Again, absolutely ridiculous. The condemnation on graven images in your King James Bible is falling down and worshiping them. Okay, it's not a sin to have a picture or a photograph. It's if you're falling down and worshiping the thing. And it's ironic too, because you know, you can't have pictures or you can't have photographs, but you can have dollar bills. You know, George Washington's face on it, or Abraham Lincoln's face on the $5 bill, or you know, Ben Franklin on the $100 bill. That's a good one. You know, if you're Amish. Yeah, you can have those graven images around, but just not paintings in your home, or you know, personal photo albums. Total stinking hypocrisy. Page 100. We couldn't take over farming since we were condemned in the eyes of the Amish. But Dan told us, you can stay here for a month or two. You'll have to look somewhere else for work. I can't give you any work, and wouldn't even if I could. I couldn't stand to benefit from anyone who's excommunicated. Thanks was all I said. Jake and Amanda did everything they could to help us. Later on, the church punished them for this. So again, if you try to get out of the Amish cult, and then you come back to it and you're saying, hey, I'm sorry, we should have, they'll treat you like dirt. They will just, see, the cult can't stand people leaving it. They hate that. Page 103. By then the Amish, our own people, were putting out so many rumors about us that it was impossible to work for our English neighbors, who was our only source of income at that point. A month went by like this. One day Leroy Smith showed up again, and he noticed the color of our skin wasn't too healthy. They will starve you to death. And again, I saw that thing in Lancaster County. I saw the Amish just turning on other, you know, ex-Amish and things like this. Just such a satanic hatred. And you know, I saw that in Baptist churches too, by the way, where I used to go. You know, one minute it's all buddy, 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 and everything else. You say, I think the Lord's calling me elsewhere. And it's just like, whoop, they change. You see them out in public and you're like, hey, how you doing? You know, you get shunned. You know, a lot of my former people I thought were friends, you know, within the independent fundamental Baptist movement, now are enemies. Not of my doing or my wife's doing or anything, but we've been excommunicated. Page 105. We were excommunicated, so we couldn't eat with the rest of the Amish. In the eyes of the Amish, if we ate with them, it would poison their food. So one of the things you need to learn when you get saved is, here's the standard. If you watch this channel, you'll get that after a little while. This is the standard. And one of the favorite sayings that I have, which I learned, which was taught to me by other Bible believers, and that is chapter and verse. Where does it say that somebody who's excommunicated, first of all, where's that, you know, where's the justification, you know, to excommunicate people the way the Amish do? Where's that at? But secondly, where does it say in this King James Bible that eating food with people like that, that will poison your food? I'll give you a little hint. It doesn't say it. Absolutely crazy. Let me just page forward here. Page 125. One of the preachers pulled brother-in-law John off to the side and told John if it would be nice if David and Fran could stay for dinner. Now would be the time to break their spirit. Tried to talk them into staying, but we felt shunned and humiliated enough for one day. I insisted on going home, and we went home. You know, real nice thing to do there. I mean, you know, you get somebody that, let's just assume for a minute that the Amish are a truly saved group of people. They're not, but let's assume that they are. You get somebody that leaves and then they come back and you say, okay, now we're going to have to just break you. We're going to have to break your spirit. Make sure that they stay longer. You know, they had gone to this church service and it was like, you can't do this and you can't do that, you know, and everything else. And go over there, you sit over here, you sit over there. You know, and treat them like dirt, and it's like, oh, stay around for the meal here because we want to humiliate you more. And this is something that Jesus Christ founded, huh? Page 131. Another man here talking about Enos Miller, I think it is. Let me just check here. Yeah, Enos Miller Jr. up here, who lives in DePester, New York. You ain't going to believe this. Enos was having sex with a man, John said. Sodomy. Is it with the Amish? Sodomy in the Amish? Oh yeah, yeah. Again, another little personal story here. Back in the 1950s, when my father graduated from high school and he and my mother got married shortly thereafter. My father never went to any kind of university schooling or anything else, and he worked for my grandfather, and then he went on to work at Sperry, New Holland at the point in time, or at that point it's Ford, New Holland now. Might even be, I don't even know if it's still Ford, New Holland. I think it might be, but they made farm machinery. My dad, you know, he designed farm machinery, balers and things like that. And anyhow, he was coming home from work the one time, and he sees this older Amish man, and he knew him from, you know, the area where my dad was raised. My dad was raised in Saltersburg, PA, and so my dad pulls over and he says, "Oh, hey, you know, I don't remember what the guy's name was, but he says, hey, you know, you want to ride home?" "Oh yeah, sure, that'd be fine, you know, and everything." So he gets in the car with my dad, and my dad drives him home, and he says, "Hey, Mel," he said, it's my dad's name, Mel. He said, "Why don't you come on in?" He said, "I'll, you know, give you a soda for driving me home." So my dad said, "Yeah, sure, that'd be nice." So they go into this Amish guy's house, and this is an older Amish man, okay, not a young man, older Amish man, and hands my dad a soda. He says, "You know, over there's the thing you can, you know, back in those days it was glass bottles," and he said, "You know, there's a thing that you can take the cap off." So my dad turns around, and he's taking the cap off, turns back around, this Amishman has his pants down. Without, you know, they don't wear underwear, and he has his pants down, and he is basically propositioning my father to perform sodomy. And of course my father throws the soda down and walks out of the house, and that was it. in the 1950s. Late 50s, maybe even early 60s, I'm not sure the exact date. But my dad always told us, you stay away from those older Amish men growing up. They're perverts. Many, many times. So, does that shock me seeing that this guy from New York was committing sodomite acts? Not at all. Not at all. But see, they put out such a nice front, don't they? Yeah, they do. Page 134. When David Yoder was away at one point in time, he was at a party and he ended up getting tattoos on his arms. It says here, the tattoos had to be removed in order to become a member of the church. Jacob and I talked for a while. Jacob being the bishop there in New York. Or no, I guess it was, I'm sorry, this is another one. This is, okay, no, okay, I'm right. Bishop Jacob Miller, he was the one in New York. Dan, his father-in-law there, was the bishop in Ohio, excuse me. Finally, Jacob looked me straight in the eyes and said, David, would you do whatever my preachers and I decide is the best way to remove your tattoos? I'll try. What do you have in mind, Jacob? I asked. What I have in mind will really show your faith in the Amish religion. First of all, put rags over your arms, then boil water and pour the hot water over the rags on your arms. I was stunned and didn't say anything for a couple moments. Finally said, Jacob, are you aware that I could get first, second, and third degree burns doing that? I could lose the use of my arms, at least partially. Jacob replied, but what faith it would show in our religion, what a small price to pay. Again, you see this Roman Catholic, this torturing the flesh type of a thing. Just disgusting. Page 138. Bishop Jacob and his preachers told the church to keep an eye on us for the next month or so to make sure we didn't do anything that went against the Amish religion. So again, it's a snitch society, a cult that is operated through fear. Page 139. My dad challenged the bishop and the preachers for scripture from the Bible on my tattoos. Brother Pete and I also challenged them. The bishop said, all that doesn't matter. Your father-in-law and said his final words on the subject. So in other words, his father-in-law, Dan there from Ohio, is a bishop. So all that, the scripture from the Bible, doesn't matter. So you have the bishop with his, sacred tradition, like the Catholics, overthrows the authority of scripture. Page 140. It says here, look at the bright side. Once your tattoos are removed, you can become a member of the church. Even if you were to become a cripple for the rest of your life, at least you'd be in the church. Let me just say this. I know personally a number of Bible-believing Christians that got saved after being in the world and living a very worldly, wicked life, and they have tattoos. As a matter of fact, my old house church that I was a pastor of for a while, there were people that had tattoos, saved people. Do you think I told them that they had to have their tattoos removed before they were a member of the church? No, I told them that they had to have faith in Jesus Christ. Of course, they knew that they were saved. Faith in Jesus Christ puts you into the church. Does the Bible forbid tattoos back in the Old Testament? Oh yeah, sure. I'm very much against tattoos. I think tattoos are a sin. But will it keep you from being saved if you have tattoos? Not at all. So then it's okay, I can get a tattoo? I didn't say that. It's a sin. Don't mess around with tattoos. Don't mess around with alcohol. Don't mess around with a lot of things, sins of the flesh. But those things aren't going to keep you from being saved. If you've done those in your past, you can still get saved. If you have fornicated, if you've been Amish in the past, you can still get saved. Let's continue. Page 143. His mother had died that weekend. I asked Pete's neighbor if he could please ask Brother Pete if we were allowed to come and pay our respects to my mother. Pete's answer was, I have to talk to the preachers first. Bishop Jacob was quick to reply that the answer was no. The bishop's reason was that they didn't allow vehicles in their funerals. However, this wasn't true at all. There were all kinds of English vehicles parked there the day of the funeral. All I wanted to do was to see my mother. We would gladly have parked our car by Brother Pete's neighbor's home, but the bishop said none of us were allowed to see Mom. Wouldn't even allow him to see his own mother. funeral. You have no authority to do that when you are a bishop. You have no authority to do those kinds of things. Continuing. Page 145. When he got to the barn, his two oldest children, Robert and Mary, 4 years old and 3 years old respectively, were upstairs in the barn playing in a fresh batch of cow feed. Andy got so furious that he didn't even take time to unhitch his team of horses. Instead, he took a strap off one of his horse's harnesses and ran up to where the children were. The strap he had in his hand had a big, heavy buckle on it. He used the strap on his children, busting their skin wide open. I only saw the end of it. Yep, I saw some of that stuff. Amish can be extremely, extremely cruel. There was Andy half bent over. He had a hold on each end of the baby bed, and he was shaking it with every ounce of strength he had in his body. I said, "Andy, what are you doing?" He quickly replied, "The devil got a hold of my child. I have to break that spirit." Thankfully, my arrival was enough to stop Andy. I later learned the baby had a stomach ache and had been crying. You see, when you are in a satanic cult like the Amish system, it begins to destroy the mind up here, because you're constantly trying to save yourself. You're never good enough. You're never good enough. It's just constantly, I'm trying to save myself. I'm doing my best. I'm doing my best. It leads to torment. It leads to mental breakdown up here. And we're going to see about that later on as we continue. Page 146. My brother-in-law Andy has always been very abusive toward his children and his wife. They already have 2 children in the graveyard due to negligence. We find out later it was actually murder. Page 147. I said to both of my parents, I didn't blame you. I understood the power of the preachers and bishops. They are not going to give up until they have broken your spirit. I mean, again, where's this stuff at in Scripture? You know, the people that you're an overseer over the flock, and you're supposed to belittle them and beat them down and destroy them, you know, put them through the spiritual exercises essentially of breaking their will so that you can control them. That's not a scriptural position. That is not a position of a bishop or a preacher. You're to edify the body of Christ, not destroy them mentally. Page 148. Mom said, "Do you remember Emma's 2 daughters, Brenda and Christine, who died?" Yes, every time I try to ask anyone about this, I get a cold shoulder. Tears were running down my mother's cheek and said, "No wonder," Mom said. "Son, I believe Emma is guilty of murder." It felt like all the blood drained from my body, Mom said. Christine was born September 15th, 1984, and died on September 17th, 1984. 2 days, in other words. I said, "Mom, how did she die if she didn't die of natural causes?" Mom said, "I believe our Emma intentionally suffocated Christine in the middle of the night." Mom kept on talking about Brenda, who was born on May 19th, 1983, and died on June 18th, 1986. Okay? Mom said, "Son, Emma is guilty of denying Brenda medical attention, and she's guilty of suffocating Christine." Mom continued, "In late fall 1986 and beginning of 1987, Emma had a nervous breakdown. During that time, she tried on different occasions to suffocate her daughter Clara. The situation was so serious that Pete had to take Clara in order to save her life. Emma had also tried to stick Clara in boiling hot water." I said, "Mom, how do you know all of this?" Mom said, "Emma is our daughter, and we were there when statements were made. I've already said more than I should have, but I'll say one more thing. Bishop Jacob Miller also knows the truth as we do. At that time, I looked at both of my parents and said, we must go to the law. Then my dad spoke for the first time. He said, "No, son, we can't go to the law." Mom agreed, saying, "Just think what the local public would think or do. This could very well open the door for the local public to get involved in our culture, and we can't have that." Both of my parents shocked me with the following statement they made. They said, "What is 1 or 2 innocent children compared to losing all of our children to the American public? At least Christine and Brenda are in heaven now. That's better than if they were in the English clothes and died and burned in hell." I was filled with mixed emotions. Mom agreeing Dad said, we shouldn't have told you this. If anyone finds out that we spoke about it, we'll be excommunicated. This was a ruling that Bishop Jacob Miller had made. I promised I would keep their secret for the time being. Then I learned about the beatings Michelle and James took in 1995 simply because they refused to join the Miller Church. The beatings were so severe that James was lucky to be able to walk. On one occasion, James was beaten with a draft harness tuck, which had a chain on the end of it. James was also beaten with a V-belt, straps, and even with a broomstick. He has taken numerous beatings and has numerous scars from those beatings. Michelle's beatings were also very severe. My sister Emma was beating Michelle in the face with her fists, while Andy was beating Michelle furiously with the V-belt. Michelle would be bleeding from her nose and her mouth. The skin of her body was broken open. Blood ran down her arms. The Miller children tried to get the Amish to help them. Some of the Amish tried, but were soon told by the bishop and preachers to drop it. Absolutely disgusting. Okay, and I'm going to read this story here. This is very, very, very disturbing. And again, this is some real gross stuff. But I need to bring this stuff out so that people understand. They can see through this whole Amish thing, because it is quite disgusting. And doing the study that we did last week on the thing of mind control, the Ignatian model of mind control, and understanding that this stuff definitely goes on, there are military bases where some of this mind control, the real MK Ultra, the stuff that there were Senate hearings on back in the 1970s, MK Ultra, there was a lot of that was done in the military bases and things like that. One of these bases that was named was Fort Drum. Fort Drum is right outside of Watertown, New York. Okay, and guess what is in Watertown? This very community that David Yoder was in for a little while, and his sister Emma and her husband Andy were in this community, and they had 12 children, excuse me, and they horribly beat their children. And you see, I believe, and there's been some different people, Fritz Springmeier, I know the one time talked about the Amish are regularly used for mind control experimentation. Why? Because they don't ever go to the authorities. So you can torture them, you can do all kinds of bad stuff to them, mess their minds up, and they won't ever go to the authorities and tell about what happened. So they're perfect victims for mind control. And of course, you know, if you can program one to be an assassin, you know, and they can go kill somebody, who's going to believe that an Amishman would kill anybody? See, real good covert soldier. But this here, I believe this guy is a result of MK Ultra mind control programming. Okay, it's up in that community, that whole New York community thing. And this is real graphic, but here we go. At approximately 5:30 that evening, Joe got out of bed, walked through the living room into the kitchen, and beat his lovely wife's head in with his bare hands. As she was lying unconscious on the floor, he kicked her until her skull opened. Their 3 children were standing in the doorway of the kitchen watching. Sam was only 5 years old, Menno was 4, and little Ada was 3. Sam knew he had to try and get his mother some help. Sam ran to his Amish uncle's house. Meanwhile, Menno and Ada watched their daddy break their mother's skull open. Joe reached into Becky's skull with his bare hands and removed her brains, then threw them all over the kitchen floor. He tore his wife's clothes off, then to make sure the devil was no longer in his wife, he took a paring knife and cut a 7-inch incision in her abdomen. Again, he used his bare hands to remove her internal organs. Their 2 youngest children were now standing motionless and silent in the doorway of the kitchen. So, you know, and after Joe finished dismembering his wife, he calmly picked up little Ada and took Menno by the hand and started walking up the road like nothing had happened. Okay, now that is a personality switch. To 1 minute be just doing this horrible, bloody, dastardly deed, killing your own wife and doing all the horrible things that he did, and just like that, snap, let's go for a walk. Yeah, major problem. You say, well, man, I hope that they lock this guy up for life. They should have given him the death penalty. Let's read page 154. The local judge found Joe guilty of involuntary manslaughter but mentally ill. He was sentenced to 2 to 5 years, a misdemeanor of first degree. Joe was eligible for parole in just 2 years. However, the Amish protested and Joe served his full 5 years. He was released on March 18th of 1998. So this monster is free today, living as an Amishman. Let's go buy cookies and baked goods from the Amish. They're such nice people. And again, see the hypocrisy with the system, with the English people, the people that are non-Amish. Amish people call, non-Amish English. Weird, but the hypocrisy. You or I do that kind of a thing, as a Christian or something like that, do that kind of a thing, that kind of a dastardly murder, we'd be getting death penalty or life in prison. But Amishman does it, 2 to 5 years in prison. Page 159. Social services were failing to adequately take care of the Miller children. They were making this a religious issue, not a child abuse issue. Michelle and James had been severely beaten, that it was life-threatening for no other reason, but they refused to join their parents' church. And here we get into a lot of the main focus of this book. David Yoder realizes that his nieces and nephews, the Miller children of his oldest sister Emma and her husband Andy, their children that they had, David Yoder realized that there's abuse there and he's trying to help them. And the government, through social services, through the local police and the law, the lawyers and things, they totally covered up the case. They did a couple of little actions and things like this against Andy and Emma Miller, but basically they got away with it. It ended up, well, I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's continue. Page 161. Jack said that he didn't think there was one good Amish man in upstate New York. Jack was afraid that the case was being covered up totally and the parents were being put back in the house. Jack was the English neighbor to the Millers. And again, this is not a novel, this is not fiction, this is his personal testimony. David Yoder's personal testimony. Talking about his own sister. Page 169. All the Amish preachers of Jacob Miller's church, plus a few members, had shown up to support Emma and Andy Miller for beating their children. Testifying on behalf of Andy and Emma Miller was Bishop Jacob Miller. While under oath, Bishop Jacob Miller stated that he was well aware of the beatings the Miller children had received and furthermore had okayed those beatings. And this guy is the bishop, huh? Now, though, another one of the Miller children, he's supposed to come and talk and testify and things. Check this out. Again, understanding MK Ultra. Look at this. Page 172. The clerk said that Peter has been acting mentally imbalanced and that they had called the Cleveland police. He's acting funny. Peter had been taken to St. Mary's Charity Hospital for psychiatric evaluation. Oh boy. Right there. This is one of the places that they will program people. Put them through the, it's not really MK Ultra anymore because it's like, oh, we stopped doing that in the 1970s. Yeah. Sure. It's this new program of mind control. And, it's a Catholic hospital. The Catholics are the ones that are behind all this mind control, torture programming stuff. Again, if you want to study this thing, look at some of videos, look up Kathy O'Brien. She was raised as a MK Ultra monarch, mind-controlled prostitute, essentially. Very high-level prostitute. And she came out of the whole thing. And she said that most of her programming was done in a Catholic church. Catholics are professionals at torture. They perfected it for centuries on Christians. But further down here it says, I'm concerned about Peter's state of mind. He is unable to stay focused on to the point where he is unable to complete a sentence, she said. I said, is he really that far gone mentally that he can no longer focus? Yes, apparently Peter has been severely traumatized in the past, she answered. They were in the process of committing Peter to the mental hospital. Yep. It's called mind control. That's what that is. Page 175. Fred Bundy, the caseworker in the Andy Miller case, had been anything but on the side of these children, all because of the Amish religion. And boy, did I see that growing up. You know, so many things. The Amish could get away with murder. They literally, you know, they could get away with anything. But, you know, English people, you have law on you like that. Get in all kinds of trouble. Page 179. I would just like to know why he stood by and let the Miller children be severely abused by their parents, Gina said. That is one thing we're not going to explain, Amos said seriously. Okay, again, talking about the thing of, you know, these Amish bishops, these Amish preachers, and it's just like, why are you standing by and letting these children be beaten, horribly beaten? You know, and two of them be murdered. And the bishop's just like, well, you know, I'm not going to talk about that. And they get away with it. You know, again, you see this whole thing of Catholicism, Roman Catholicism. If you're a Catholic, you are citizens of two different countries. Whatever country you live in, and also a citizen of the Vatican. It's a religious, political system. The Amish are the same way. They have their own system of law. And local law enforcement doesn't dare mess with them. It's very unpopular, you know. Down here, page 184, Peter still has a blank stare in his eyes. I don't think the medication he's on is going to be powerful enough. I'm afraid we'll have to hospitalize him before it's all over. Irvin also had a phone number out of New Phila, Ohio that you could call concerning mental patients. Over here, Peter didn't seem right at all. Irvin called New Phila, Ohio and had someone come out and take a look at Peter for a second opinion. The phone call Irvin made was to a crisis hotline that specialized in mental patients. Yeah. They also had a religious background, which was why Irvin wanted their opinion. This was fine by me. Again, you know, David Yoder's, you know, somewhat ignorant of some of this MK Ultra stuff. He doesn't understand it. You know, he doesn't understand how evil the mental hospitals and all that, you know, stuff, that whole system is. You know, and especially when it's tied to Catholicism, which it says there they had a religious background. I'd be curious as to what that was. I didn't get to research that yet. But if I was to guess, it's probably Catholic. You know, they like to torture people. You know, Peter appears, this is page 188, Peter appears to be getting worse. His eyes have a wild stare. If you saw my study on devil possession and the eyes, you know that that's a mark of devil possession. The eyes will have a weird stare, they'll bulge, you know, and they just kind of stare, and they don't really blink much, you know. It'll show up in the eyes. You can see that study for more on that subject. Page 190. Schwarzentruber preachers had a meeting with Irvin that evening, so Irvin had to take the phone off the hook. They were trying to get Irvin to take the case out of the courts and let the Amish deal with it. They finally did take this whole thing of the Miller children to the court system, and the Amish were trying everything that they could do to stop that, you know, the law from getting involved. Okay? And of course now these preachers, these papist Amish, are trying to get Irvin. He's one of the oldest children in the Miller family. He's out on his own, living on his own, but they're trying to get him to confess these things. Look what they say here, page 191. Afraid so, replied the preachers, but Irvin, you should make yourself free from sin, they said. By getting the law involved in this, you have sinned against the community and God. Irvin, please remove it from the courts and excommunicate yourself and make yourself free from sin. So, freedom from sin, of confessing sin and whatever else, it has to do with, you know, your membership in the Amish cult that you're part of. Sure it does. Down here further on the page it says, Preacher Enos Yoder and Atlee Troyer both replied, Irvin, please make yourself free from sin for the good of the community before it is too late. Irvin said, if I have sinned so bad and you want me to be excommunicated, then why have my mother and father not been excommunicated for their sins, for beating my brothers and sisters? The Bible speaks of discipline of the children. They might have been a little harsh, but discipline is good. Irvin, this has gone too far. You children standing up against your parents this way is no good for the community. Please make yourself free from sin, Irvin. Then the preachers left. You got to think about the good of the church. You don't want to, remember Jack Hyles, they said when he was being attacked or being exposed the one time, Vic Nishik, his deacon, stood up and was like, trying to read off things about Jack Hyles, fornicating with Vic's wife, Jenny. And Jack Hyles yelled, "You're trying to destroy fundamentalism." Cults, what these places are. Page 201. Why won't one single Amish person stand up for these children? But I knew the answer to that last question. Most families were guilty of harsh beatings. They were afraid that their children would also speak out and ask for help. So that's why a lot of the Amish were keeping silent, because they were guilty of the same things, in other words. Page 207. The Amish believe if a child is ignorant, he'll grow up to be a more obedient child, and as they become adults, they'll make fewer problems for the parents and bishop. Ignorance would also keep them from modernizing, leaving the organization, and there would be less threat of the American public ever finding out the true Amish way of life. Yep, that's exactly it. That's why the Catholics, for years and years, for centuries, there was the Dark Ages. They didn't want people to have the Word of God in their own language so that they could understand it. And the Amish are doing the same thing today. It's in German, and they don't understand it. Page 210. We got talking, and soon we were talking about the Amish and cases of animal sex that took place among them. Again, I heard of that stuff going on when I was raised in Lancaster County. There'd be a farm show, and all of a sudden you'd see some Amish would get caught with one of the animals or something like this. Bestiality, sodomy, all kinds of wickedness, incest, rape, child molestation, all this stuff going on among the Amish. But yet somehow everybody turns the other way. They just kind of, I didn't see that. This system has to be stopped, brethren. We have to do something to put these communities, to get these communities shut down, to stop this disease from spreading any further. And if you're Amish out there and you're watching this, you need to get out of that thing. Put your faith in Jesus Christ first, and then get as far away from that thing, and don't just run away and whatever else. You go back in there and you confront these bishops. You get in their face and you show them the Bible, what the Bible says about their wickedness. And you rebuke them in the name of Jesus Christ. And you say, you have no right to be doing what you're doing, and I'm going to be in ministry to shut you down. This is disgusting. And you know what? Let me just say one other thing. If you know that stuff is going on and you keep your mouth shut, silence is consent. Okay? You're going to be blamed for those sins that you are helping to cover up within the Amish system. If you know that there is wickedness and sin and things going on, and you're overlooking it, God's going to hold you accountable, just as accountable as the people that are doing those sins. So if you're a good Amishman out there, a part of a good Amish family that doesn't abuse and rape and whatever else their children, but you know that there are other people in your community, and again, the guy I knew down in Smyrna Mills, Jonas Yoder, he told me, he said, yeah, we know about families in our community here that there's sexual problems going on, and there's, they're beating their children and stuff like this. We know about it. Why isn't he stopping it? Well, it would affect his job. It would affect his place that he lives. It would affect his family connections, his standing in the community. Page 215. As they checked Peter in, he changed personalities in a matter of seconds. But there's no MK Ultra mind control stuff going on among the Amish there in New York and other places as well. Yes, there is. Page 218. Irvin's brother James had himself been severely beaten in 1995 with chains, sticks, and straps, and was lucky just to walk. Excuse me. And if you read the whole book, it's shocking, the types of things that go on. Page 225. Andy had said that he had failed, that he should have disciplined his children harder when they were younger. James also tried to force his brothers and sisters to go to church. What terrified me about Andy Miller was that he still didn't think he'd done anything wrong. Of course not, because that's what their cult teaches. Page 226. The Amish put up such an innocent front, or put up such an innocent front up that the public says, yeah, they might be a little backwards, they might be a little strict with their children, but they're harmless. The public looks at the Amish as being peaceful and wishing their life was that simple. You'll see that in the comments all the time on Amish videos. As the old saying goes, the grass is always greener on the other side of the fence, but it's not. I lived on all sides of that 10-acre pasture field. Anything is hardly ever as it appears to be. Very true. Words that David Yoder wrote. Very, very true. And those of us that are from Amish areas, that are, you know, me being from Lancaster County, yeah, we see things, we hear things, we know things. And everybody just kind of looks the other way and just, let's just not think about this, and, you know, it's a cover-up. From the Amish perspective, these children have done the unforgivable. They turned their parents into a law enforcement agency, but the children tried to get help from the Amish community, and that didn't work, so they had to seek outside help. And now these same children have been victimized not once but 3 times, once by their parents, second by the Amish, and third by the local system. Because, see, the local legal system, a lot of times they don't want to rock the boat, they don't want to make bad feelings, so they'll look the other way with the Amish too. I'm talking about police. I mean, I just another little story here quickly. When I was down in there at 60 Peach Lane in Ronks, Lancaster County, I had an ATV that was stolen, and we called the police, and the police just kind of hee-hawed around about it, and they didn't really follow the leads that we gave them, because we knew who did it, and, you know, they got away with the crime. And I remember the one time my father was yelling at this detective. He was saying, you're not doing anything. You're not doing anything to stop this crime. And the detective said, well, he said, I got to tell you the truth. He said, we had so many, he said, most of my investigation is about child abuse here in Lancaster County. And he said, I'm dealing with that all the time. It's like a full-time job dealing with this child abuse stuff. And he was referring to the Amish. So yeah, it goes on. Page 231. The children would prefer to go to public schools, but I don't expect they'll be able to do that, as social services is in direct contact with the Amish bishop and preachers. Government yoked up with the Amish bishop and preachers. I left a Baptist cult for doing that the one time. They were trying to require police background checks. Well, not trying. They were requiring police background checks to teach Sunday school. I said, see you later. I'm not going to have anything to do with a church that yokes up to the federal government. I don't think so. I believe in the separation of church and state. Government churches are frightening. Page 232. The school these children are forced to go to doesn't have any drinking water. They will have to bring their own. The boys' outhouse in the past had never had any toilet paper. They always just put grass in the rafters and used that. There have been times in the winter when they ran out of grass and they were forced to either use snow or their own fingers. The girls usually had newspaper, but they had run out and been forced to use the same tactics. So you see, your quaint little Amish schoolhouses are not so quaint after all. Page 233. Fran's brother Toby, a bishop in the Schwarzentrooper Church in Minnesota. Toby also explained that 2 years earlier in Canton, Minnesota, in the settlement where he lived, an Amish school teacher had beaten a child so badly that the parents took the child to the doctor because he complained about a backache. The doctor examined the child and discovered bruises on the child's back and reported it to the district attorney. The district attorney didn't press charges. Toby and his preachers held a meeting to see about removing the school teacher to ease tension, but one of the preachers wouldn't agree with Toby, and the teacher was never removed. The Amish did again what they do best: find the weak link and zero in on it. Just like you do in the military or other things like that. Interesting that these plain, simple, gentle people would use military tactics. Imagine that. Page 234. While they were in the waiting room, Andy made a big fuss about Melinda having to leave her cap on when she was put to sleep in case something went wrong. He didn't want her to die without a cap on her head. She was having some dental work done. They said you have to have that covering on there because she'll go to hell if she doesn't have it on. There's a little girl, a couple-year-old little girl, had to have that cap on, and I've seen that. You know, again, I was with, you know, around some Amish the one time, and their children were playing, and the one little girl fell over. You know, they were getting kind of rough, and she fell over, and her cap flew off, and it was like, put that cap back on. It's not even reached the age of accountability, you know, but they're so worried that this little head covering thing is going to be their salvation. Just mortified, you know. Page 235. In this case, I think social services should be renamed Parent Protective Services. Commissioner Clint Manson from Social Services has close ties with the Amish community. Again, political, religious connections. Page 238. I understand that the Miller family might not be the ideal family and that some of the children appear more nervous than others. 2 of them have already been sent to the mental hospital for programming, in other words, and unfortunately I expect more to go as time goes along. Excuse me. But you see, these children that are being horribly physically abused, and they're being sent to a mental hospital for treatment. You know? Sure. You know, where I used to live, I grew up southern part of Lancaster County, then I moved to the northern part of Lancaster County, and I was living down in Kleinfeldersville, and right up not too far from there was Wernersville Mental Home, and just up the road a couple miles from it was a huge Jesuit center. But I'm sure there'd be no connection with spiritual exercise, mind control, MK Ultra, mental hospitals. No connections. And Amish all through the area. Nothing like that. Page 244. Bishop Jacob Miller and his preachers thought Andy and Emma should be able to go home, saying the Amish were too poor to give them a home. That has always been the Amish way, to cry poverty. They would like everyone to believe that they are just poor, innocent farmers. This defense has always worked for them in the past, but the truth is they are neither poor nor innocent. Okay? And just over here real quick, this quote, there seems to be no limit to the level of deception that the Amish will stoop to. Absolute truth. Just to give you a couple stories. The house I grew up in, it was a 5-bedroom house. We had 5 children. And actually one of the bedrooms was just part of the recreation room downstairs. Kind of like a finished basement. My dad actually closed in part of the finished basement to create another room. So it wasn't only like actually a 4-bedroom house. It was like a bi-level type of a thing. And we had like 6.5 acres, I think it was, where I grew up. And that house in 2001, they sold for $320,000. And the poor, simple, plain Amish paid for it. Now, I can't say in cash because they didn't have that much cash, but they paid for it with personal checks. No mortgage. But they're poor. They just barely have any money. They can barely get by. And there was a big grocery store down there, Ben Byler. He originally had started it on his farm down a little bit below where I grew up there, Peach Lane. And he started this little store. He would get, you know, damaged goods from grocery stores, cans that had dents or whatever, things like that. And he started this store, and then it expanded, and he built a bigger store down in Quarryville. He had one in Schaeferstown, and he has one, I think, in up near Elm, Manheim area, something like that. But he's a multimillionaire. And see, the multimillionaire, and he's vacation home in Montana too, by the way. Again, my brother used to work for my older brother. I have an older brother named Dean, and he worked for Scenic Ridge Construction in Intercourse, Pennsylvania, which was run by Amish, and they did all these great big huge, you know, building projects. And I'm pretty sure it was them that they flew to Montana to build a vacation home for Ben Byler that owns these grocery stores. But you'll see him, you know, it's all, we're just driving around our buggy. We're simple, plain folk. They're multi-billionaires. Millionaires, excuse me. Well, they might be billionaires. Some of them, I don't know. The Mennonites are the same way. Guy I used to work for, owned all kinds of big businesses. You know, John Snyder. And it was like him, his wife, his daughter. Just, there's a Suburban. $60,000 Suburbans, all of them driving $60,000 Suburbans. all this money at a yacht, sitting out beside the wood shop where I worked. You know, simple people. They're simple. They don't have much money. Sure. And then they'll go to areas that are poor and they'll buy up a whole bunch of farms there, and then they put their little surf Amish on there. And you go and you're given a home and everything, a place to stay in exchange for working. And then you build up the community, and then you go and you take over another community, and then you take over another community. I really like to see them get out of the state of Maine so that they don't do here what was done down in Lancaster County. But let's continue. Page 246. Some of these Amish have even tried to stand up for these Miller children, but were quickly put back in their place. Bishop Jacob made them aware that he was the chosen one and they were only the followers. I believe Bishop Jacob is terrified of the outcome of this case. He's afraid this will open the door for the public to come in and perhaps investigate more of his members. Bishop Jacob has ordered all his members to support the Miller parents rather than the children. Yep. Sounds kind of like a lot of the Baptists out there. Don't you question the man of God. Sure. Page 254. It scares me to think that social services and the Amish have been working together throughout the case. Social services had been working hand in hand with Bishop Jacob Miller and his preachers. In fact, what took place in the Miller case might very well cause another split among the Amish Miller churches. And it did, by the way, because a lot of the ones that are up here in Fort Fairfield up north, they're actually from New York. They're from this exact area. I talked to them. Page 255. I began to suspect that Pam had been paid off from social services. You know, of course that would never happen. The Amish would never give money to secular officials to buy them off. Of course not. Page 266. Rachel, age 19, has a hearing aid in one ear. She lost almost all the hearing in that ear due to the extensive untreated ear infections she had as a child. I can attest to that. That happens a lot among the Amish. Betty, age 15, at times appears normal, happy, but she also has mood swings. I'm convinced that it's psychological, caused by being locked in the closet with a weapon by her parents. Betty was convinced that she would be shot at some time. She's on Prozac. Oh, you know, another pharmaceutical drug. People that are on Prozac, after a while they go crazy. It's really, really bad. Again, you know, I had a high school friend, Travis Metzler, you know, another Mennonite Amish type of a family, and he was molested as a child, and he was on, I don't know if it was Prozac or Zoloft or one of them, and he decided he's not going to take this stuff anymore, and ended up killing himself. Blew his brains out. There are a lot of suicides down there in Lancaster County among the Amish and Mennonites. Again, when my dad was a young man in his teens, him and my two uncles, you know, my dad's two brothers, were walking out through the fields back there in Soudersburg, PA, and they found an Amishman hanging in the tree. Hung himself. Page 268. I'm seriously concerned about Michelle's state of mind. Lately, whenever I call up there, Michelle is yelling at the children, telling them to shut up and get out of the way. Michelle takes a lot of prescription drugs. Oh boy. So the older sister there in the Miller family, the one that was initially protecting her younger brothers and sisters, now she's acting crazy as well because she's on prescription drugs. Mind-altering, mind-control drugs. And you know, you see all these shooters, all these school shooters and all this other stuff, they're all on prescription drugs. Ritalin, Prozac, Zoloft, all this different stuff. They're always on those drugs. It's all part of the mind control agenda. Page 276. Emma is guilty of the attempted murder of her daughter Clara in 1986. I'm convinced she's guilty of murder of her daughter Christine, but because she wears the Amish clothes, she is walking free today. Yep. Andy further stated that he made numerous confessions in church. Like a Catholic. Just like a Catholic. You go to auricular confession and you Go into the little box there, and the priest is on the other side. You say, "Forgive me, Father, I've sinned," and all this other stuff. It's Catholic. That's all this thing is. Page 281. Smithers was convicted on April 16, 1999 on 7 counts of rape, sodomy, sexual abuse, and kidnapping. He was sentenced to a combination of concurrent prison terms, which added up to 62.5 to 125 years in prison. The judge imposed maximum sentences on all 7 convictions and made all but 2 of the sentences consecutive, meaning he cannot begin serving one before completing the prior sentence. You say, what's the deal? Smithers, Mr. Smithers here, was not Amish, and he raped an Amish woman. Look what David Yoder says here. Had Mr. Smithers been a member of the Amish community in St. Lawrence County, up in New York there, he would not have been prosecuted. Yeah, exactly true. If you're Amish, you can rape, you can do whatever you want, and it's just like, oh, we just kind of look the other way. We excommunicated him for a couple of weeks, so he learned his lesson. But you get a English guy, rapes a Amish woman, and he gets 125 years in prison. And yet you had the Amish guy from earlier that kills his wife, knocks her on the ground, busts her head open, throws her brains around, cuts her open, throws her guts around the kitchen, and he gets 5 years. Page 282. In another case, an Amish man in Meadville, Pennsylvania, brutally murdered and dismembered his wife and only received a 5-year sentence, a much lower sentence than Mr. Smithers did for rape. This crime was so horrific, he even committed it in front of his innocent young children. The Amish only excommunicated my brother-in-law, who raped my wife a couple dozen years ago for a short period of time. He is now a lead preacher in a new Amish settlement in Iowa. And again, I've met the ones that are the Amish up here that are up north of us, that are in Fort Fairfield. They lived in Iowa for a while. They were in an Amish settlement out there. They just move all the time, all the time. They just move and move and move, like criminals on the run. The Amish culture convicted Mr. Gingrich on numerous occasions for molesting his daughters. No charges were ever brought against him. He is now living in Knox County, Ohio. June 26, 1998, ABC Peter Jennings aired a segment of Pennsylvania Amish concerning Amish boys had been involved with the Peyton motorcycle gang. This was a major drug deal. In order to make a believer out of the local community, the FBI had to get involved. The 2 Amish boys were arrested along with the Peyton motorcycle gang. This was one incident my Amish culture could not cover up. I point to these cases to show how all are not equal under the law. Very true. And like I said, I remember that case. It was right over in Intercourse. They were caught, you know, and these Amish boys. The FBI got involved. It was a big type of a thing, but it died down so quick. The papers just really didn't even give it much coverage. The Amish just can't do wrong, especially in Lancaster County. There's a big power thing there. Page 282. Like my parents once said, you be very careful what you tell an Englishman about our culture. They must not know about the bad things that happen within our culture. Yep. Next page. Mr. Byler further stated if anyone were to make trouble for the Amish, the DA would prosecute to the fullest extent of the law. According to these 2 tragic cases, the DA kept his promise to Mr. Byler. At this point, I am confident that if you were to enter the DA's home, you would find Amish artifacts in his home. In other words, the DA's bought off, the district attorney there. Sure, absolutely. Page 284. There have been numerous sexual allegations made by my niece, Rachel, against her father, Andy, which the DA had refused to prosecute. He has also refused to prosecute the felony assault charges against Andy. Over a half-dozen detailed sexual encounters with Rachel and sexual encounters assault against Michelle, his own people had convicted him of. Still, Andy is walking free. Yep. Page 286. In the beginning of August, my nephew Peter had another mental breakdown. The week of the 20th, he was released from the mental hospital. Just keep programming him. Bishop John Miller and preacher Enos Yoder convicted Peter to convinced Peter to take a trip to New York to apologize to his parents and ask the district attorney's office to drop all charges against Andy and Emma. At this point, Peter was not mentally stable, but that appeared not to be the Amish #1 concern. Peter dropped the assault charges against his father. Again, the Amish did whatever they had to do to protect their own. So the guy's crazy. He's just gotten out of a mental institution, and they're like, come on, you got to come up here with us here and testify and drop the charges against your parents that beat you, which made you go crazy. The logic in this whole thing is just crazy. Page 302. Andy made remarks that he was going to do away with Emma and commit suicide. The bishop was trying to convince Andy that he has to admit himself to the mental hospital. Again, send him to the mental hospital for more programming. The bishop was also trying to convince the deputies that Andy is unstable and they feared for their lives if he wasn't admitted to the mental hospital. The bishop and the preachers were able to get Andy to admit himself to Hepburn Hospital in Ogdensburg, New York. Andy was treated for his antidepressant problems, and the doctors immediately prescribed Prozac for him. The doctors also ordered that Andy would see a psychologist once a week. Getting programmed up real good, so he eventually kills a whole bunch of people. Page 312. There have been those of Michelle's brothers and sisters who have accused Michelle of having a sexual relationship with Mr. Hyde. The children's lawyer and the oldest sister starts to actually fornicate with him because, you know, he's helping to cover up for the whole thing. It just, the stuff that goes on and the stories that David Yoder tells in this book are just incredible. But again, reading this book, it brought back so many memories to my upbringing in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, and hearing the stories and seeing, oh man, I think my most ridiculous hated memories of coming from Lancaster County was I worked in the tourist industry. I worked at Strasburg Railroad. I worked at the dining car, then I actually cooked on the train as well. And we get these tourists, these poor naive tourists, and they come up and they'd be like, do you know where there are any Amish farms? They'd say Amish farms. Do you know where there are any Amish farms here in Lancaster County? Do you know where there's any Amish that we could see? And I'd be like, drive around the back roads, you know, they're everywhere. Oh, how they live? Do you know how they live? And I was like, well, very much like anybody else. They shop at the same stores. They do a lot of the same things. They're very corrupt. And these tourists just, I mean, it's like you just desecrated some holy name or something, you know, by saying the Amish are corrupt. You know, it's just ridiculous. I sold firewood the one time to this university professor, and he said to me the one time, he said, because I was like really into the non-electric thing at that point in time, using hand tools and stuff like that. And he said, I guess you know, you're very much like the Amish then, you know, in the area that just do everything without electricity and with just hand tools and things. And I just laughed and I said, that's not what the Amish do. And because we were talking about cutting weeds and things, and he was saying that they probably use a scythe. And I was like, no, they don't use a scythe. I said, they use weed whackers, gas weed whackers. And he was like, that would be against their religious faith. And I said, Professor, I said, drive around the back roads, you'll see it. And he took my advice. And he came back next time I saw him, he's like, I can't believe it, you're right. I was like, yeah, you know, the hypocrites. You know, and see, again, like I said in my other study, I don't care if you want to use, you know, primitive types of technology and you want to drive around a horse and buggy and you want to live without electricity and stuff like that. I'm into some of that stuff. I think some of that's good. But if you're doing it to earn your salvation or to stay saved or whatever else, you're missing it. Okay? That's not going to work. Continuing here, page 312 again. Down lower it says, this is about educating the American public. The American public must realize that child abuse does happen among the strictest Amish sectors in the Amish culture. Absolutely true. Page 315. February 22nd, 2000, the Miller case went back to courts. This is attempting to place the three youngest children back in custody of their parents. The courts ruled in favor of the parent, and the three youngest children were placed back in custody of their parents. Even though Mr. Miller in the past was expelled from church for performing a sexual act in the presence of one of his daughters, and Mrs. Miller in the past was expelled from church for attempting to kill her daughter Clara by placing her in a burning stove in the living room, by suffocation, and also by attempting to place her in boiling water, Mrs. Miller was also expelled in the past for intentionally suffocating her daughter Christine on 9/17/1984. Christine was only 2 days old at the time of her death. I don't understand how the local legal system can look the other way on these issues the way they have. We will continue working for all Amish abused victims. Yeah. So in other words, the children were originally taken away because their parents, Andy and Emma Miller, were abusing them terribly. And the court system eventually, within a couple months, or maybe it was a year or two, gave the children back. The 3 youngest children gave them back to these monsters that called themselves their parents. Absolutely sick. Page 316. Currently there is a case, it has a number there, pending in Guernsey County, Ohio, where a 67-year-old Amish grandfather is charged with raping 4 of his granddaughters aged 3, 5, and 8 years old. His only punishment by our Amish culture was an excommunication from the church for 6 weeks, even though he has been a known sex offender since 1970. Down here further, when the detective first tried to talk to Toby and Katie Yoder, they refused to speak to him. Toby told the detective that he would have to talk to the bishop, Mose Miller, first, and if the bishop would okay it, then they would speak with him. You can't talk about the child abuse that your grandfather's doing to you until you get permission from the bishop. It's a religious cult, folks. It's not the system that the Lord Jesus Christ set up. Page 319. A second case in June 1999 involved Joe and Sarah Yoder of Guernsey County and their 17-year-old daughter, who was 3 months pregnant on the time of the incident. She was beaten so severely by her father for talking back to her mother that she had to be hospitalized. In direct result to that severe beating, she lost her unborn child. Due to severe internal bleeding, the hospital was forced to perform an abortion in order to save the mother, or they would lose the mother and child. No felony assault charges were ever filed. No second-degree murder or manslaughter charges were filed against the father for allegedly killing his daughter's unborn child directly or indirectly at this point. Why? Why could it be that non-Amish could never get away with it, but Amish can? They can murder and get away with it. It's almost like they're Catholic and they have the protection of the Catholic Church. Page 320. Preacher, John H. Miller, Davis City, Iowa, he raped the bishop's daughter. He is also the lead preacher in the new Amish culture settlement in Davis City, Iowa. And of course the bishop's daughter here is talking about Fran, his wife. Raped her as an underage girl. She was a minor and he raped her, but he's a preacher now. Well, I bet you he's really, called of the Lord to lead the flock, Harvey J. Miller, Utica, Ohio. Harvey performed sexual acts with 5 young Amish boys. Yep. Goes on all the time. Page 322. In November of 1998, Bishop Dan C. Slawbach's son, John, age 20, was a teacher at Cherry Ridge School on Bell Church Road in Knox County. One Thursday afternoon, John had seriously beaten 5 of his students, and it talks about blood running down one's leg. When the deputy arrived at the school in response to that call, the teacher downplayed the event. The deputy didn't even bother checking the victims. His last words were, "Oh, I know how it is. Kids get out of line and you have to discipline them." Yeah. Over here, the next page. Bishop Enos somehow failed to mention to the sheriff's department that his daughter had feared for her safety and that they had pulled all her teeth in less than an hour. Okay, that means they did it themselves, not going to a dentist. They did it. Also, this illegal procedure was performed by our Amish culture, who was not qualified or licensed to pull a single tooth, and Fanny was not the only child who had this illegal procedure performed on in his family. Okay, this girl ran away from home. The police got her and they were like, oh, we're going to help you. Oh, wait, you're Amish? Oh, we can't. Go back to your parents. And here it talks about this. As soon as social services learned that our victim was Amish, not only did their tone of voice change, so did their facial expressions. Social services did not want to hear any alleged allegations that were made against Fanny's parents, period. They appeared to be more concerned about Fanny's parents' rights than they were about the victim's rights. Okay, one more thing to read here, page 325. My oldest sister in St. Lawrence County, New York, confessed to the bishop for intentionally suffocating her 2-day-old daughter Amanda, and to this day she has never been prosecuted. What all the Swartzen Trooper Amish church members are guilty of is to help cover up these criminal acts. I find that unacceptable. Amen. That's the book Amish Deception. You can get this book. Right there is the ISBN number. Here's the website where you can buy a copy of this thing if you want a copy of this. There's the ID number, lulu.com. Okay? And I can tell you, if you've been deceived by the Amish cult, I would recommend you get a copy of this thing, you read it. And then you pass it out, you get it to other people. We need to stop this thing. If for no other reason, we need to stop it for the children's sake. For these little Amish children that have nowhere to turn to. Their bishop is the one that's helping, the bishops are encouraging the parents to punish the children and to physically and sexually abuse the children. You say, well, every single Amish church out there? Well, I don't know. I don't know. That's the whole problem. The system is such that this can happen everywhere. It can be going on in any Amish community. And from the Amish I've talked to, it is going on in most of the communities. I mean, the one down in Smyrna Mills is a very liberal, it's kind of a modern Amish church. They use rubber wheels on their wagons and things like that. They do drive buggies, but they also have rubber wagons, rubber wheeled wagons and stuff like this. And they actually have a church house that they meet in, which is not Amish. Usually they meet in their homes, and there's abuse going on down there. And there's all kinds of problems. I mean, we have to stop this thing. I mean, I realize it's kind of like trying to stop Catholicism, It's like, the Lord's going to eventually do this whole thing in. But what we have to do as Bible-believing Christians is we should stand up against the Amish system. And, I'm going to be doing quite a few videos on the Amish because this, to me, is a very personal thing. As you've heard in this study, I have a lot of experience, a lot of personal experiences with this Amish culture. I was raised among them. I was raised around them. I mean, my ancestors are Mennonite. So, this is very, very personal to me. And it's something that I feel that I need to get out there because, honestly, there's really nothing out there that really definitively exposes the Amish for what they really are. And in fact, now that I noticed that, and I'm going to be talking a little bit about this, but Hollywood culture, popular culture, is actually promoting the Amish now. Leaving Amish, and there's other ones, these Amish reality shows, and I'm going, what are you talking about? I mean, it's insane. And of course, they're showing the Amish ways and stuff like this, but it's making people more interested in the Amish. And there's all these novels and stuff and everything making the Amish look like, oh, this wonderful system. It's a satanic, corrupt system. It is a cult. And the Amish, they need to get out of it. And if you're watching this and you're Amish, you're nodding your head going, yeah, yep. I've had former Amish right to the ministry here, and things. I'm not going to name anybody because I don't do that. But what goes on. You know what's going on. If you're an Amish youth and you're watching this with your iPhone or your whatever, some kind of way, or you're over at an English neighbor's house and you're watching this, you have no option. You have to get out of that thing. And you say, Bryan, how do I get out of it? First thing you need to do, get yourself a King James Bible. Watch the salvation message at the end of this video. I'm going to have the link to it. Watch that salvation message. Get saved. Then the Lord can help you to get out of that system. You say, but I love my parents, I love my family, what am I supposed to do? You leave that up to the Lord. Okay? If your parents are abusing you, and I mean, to me, it's not even a question of, okay, you're being abused, you got to get out right away, so just wait and then get saved. No, no. No matter what your situation is as an Amish person, man or woman, you need to get saved. You need to get the Lord on your side, and then He will fight your battles for you. Because you'll see it time and time again. You get these people, they leave the Amish system, then they come back to the Amish system, then they leave, then they come back, then they leave, and then they come back. And I heard a former Amish guy, he's saved now, and he said it'll take about 3 to 5 years to get out of the Amish system. Okay? They hold your family hostage. They tell you you're not allowed to come back, and you're not allowed, you know, whatever. Bad situation. It is a religious cult. All right? So, please watch the salvation message. The next study we're going to be doing is actually going to be on the scriptures. We're going to get more into the Bible. This one I just needed to go through this book. I wanted to do a book review. We're going to be doing some book reviews. I'm going to be doing some video reviews. We're not going to be talking about a whole lot of scripture in these reviews, but I'm going to be having some actual sermons interspersed through these Amish exposed videos to give you the scriptures that you need to take back to your bishop and say, you're wrong. You are in an unscriptural position. I mean, we need to get some Amish to turn on these bishops and go back in there. You have a scriptural right to. I'm going to show you that in the study coming up. You have a scriptural right when you are saved to go back and expose these wicked men. You have every right to go back and get in their face and say, I don't respect you. You are in an unscriptural position. You are damning people with this cult that you are running, and I oppose you, and I'm going to stand against you. You're not going to excommunicate me. Your little excommunications and shunnings don't mean anything to me. You have my family kidnapped right now with your religious cult, and I'm going to do my best to get them out of that cult, and I don't care about your shunning, and I don't care about your banning. And if you try to hurt my family, I'm going to expose you to the public. People need to start standing up against this system. And that's why I'm doing these studies. So please watch the salvation message. If you are not saved, please watch it. That'll be it for this video. Thank you for watching. We will see you in the next Amish Exposed video.